What you're going to learn in this tutorial is how to make a space battleship. You're going to learn how to make the basic shape of the space battleship. You're going to learn how to use an add-on called the discombobulator to add detail to your battleship. You're going to learn how to model the actual guns. You're going to have to learn how to use modifiers like the bevel modifier to add detail to your model. You're going to learn how to work with shaders. You're going to learn how to copy and paste materials to adjust the different materials on your space battleship. As you work your way through this tutorial, along with me, I not only try to say what I'm doing, I try to say why I'm doing what I'm doing. I try to, as much as possible, say whatever keyboard shortcut I'm using at the time. So thanks for taking a look at this tutorial, and I hope that you enjoy it. There's a recent trend going on in YouTube where tutorials are getting shorter and shorter. There's a thing going on with 1 minute tutorial. I actually learned some very good stuff from some of the tutorials to do that. However, on this channel, I don't tend to do that. I try to explain things as well as I can. If you like the step-by-step tutorials that are on this channel, please click on the like button. The YouTube robots will like that. That'll make them happy. Also, please subscribe to the channel. Also, if you would like to support this channel even further, go check out my Patreon page. If you look to the upper right, there should be a button where you can select that button and you can get to my Patreon page, and that will just assist me and help me to have more time to make more tutorials like this. Thank you. Hi, this is Ali Arango of Little Guy CGI. Today I'm going to show you how to make a space battleship in Blender 2.81. So let's get started. Okay, the first thing you want to do is go to your upper left. You're going to go to Edit, go down to Preferences. You're then going to go to Add-ons. What we're looking for here is the discombobulator add-on. So you'll see Add Mesh, discombobulator. Put a check mark next to this so that this add-on is active. Okay, in Blender, if you want to rotate your view, you can hold the middle mouse button. To rotate your view, you can go to the upper right, left click and drag to rotate your view. Currently, we're going to go to the upper left. We're going to go to View, Viewpoint, and then we're going to go down to Front View. If you look to the upper left, you can see we're in a front orthographic view. Orthographic view as opposed to a perspective view. It's kind of like a blueprint view. It's kind of like looking at a 3D object as if it were 2D. What we want to do now is go to our upper left. We're going to left click on a triangular looking thing there and go to edit mode. We're going to now, with our cube selected, we're going to right click and then we're going to select subdivide. Once we selected subdivide, we have one subdivision. We also have this menu pop up to the left that says subdivide. We're going to select the triangle there, and then where we see this number of cuts, we're going to take this up to 3. So I'm going to left click to lock that in, as well as deselect our cube. Okay, what we want to do is select this half of the cube now. If I zoom in, right, in orthographic view, if I select just this right here, the way we're looking in solid view, I'll only select these faces here. When I hold them in the mouse button, you can see we have all of this geometry here, as well as the geometry you can't see. We want to select all of this geometry, not just the faces here. So the way we can do that is we're going to go to View, back to Viewpoint, go back to Front View, right? We're going to press Z and then go to Wireframe View. The reason why we're coming in Wireframe is we want to select all of this geometry, not just the faces here. So when we look to the upper left, we can see our Vertex Select, Edge Select, as well as Face Select. We're going to select Face Select. I'm going to hover my mouse right here. I'm going to press B for Box Select, left click and drag slightly past the halfway point to select this geometry here. I'm going to press Z and then go back to solid view. I'm then going to press X, which brings up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. Okay, this dot right here, this is our origin point. We want this origin point to be right in the center. The reason why we want this to be right in the center is the reason why we divided this mesh is we want to put a mirror modifier on this. When you work in 3D, when you use mirror modifiers, a lot of times when you're working with symmetrical objects or shapes, having a mirror modifier effectively enables you to do half of the amount of work that you normally would have to do. So we're going to go to our upper left. We're going to go back to object mode. We're going to look to the right to where we see this looks like a wrench. We're going to select there. We can see the add modifier panel here. We're going to left click on what looks like an arrow. And then we're going to select mirror modifier. Now this mirror is mirrored right on this origin point. That's why the mirror is lined up correctly. And this is how we want it to be lined up. So what we're going to do is go to our upper left. We're going to go over next to object mode, go back down and select edit mode. See how we have like, it looks like this is just gray here. We want this side to look just like this side. This is the side that was made from the mirror modifier. So what we can do is go to the right and select, it looks like a triangle with 3 circles on it. So now our virtual geometry made from our mirror modifier looks just like this geometry on that side as well. Okay, I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I want this geometry here. When I say this geometry, I mean these 4 faces right here. Because we have a mirror modifier on this this cube, the other side will be selected as well. So I'm going to press the C key. I'm going to roll my mouse wheel to adjust the sides of the C key. I'm just now left clicking. I'm going to right click to get out of paint select. That's what we were just in, paint select. That's what we got when we pressed the C key. Right now we're on, when you look to the upper left, we're on the select box. We want to go down to this move tool here so we can see this manipulator, and this manipulator allows us to easily adjust objects. Okay, when you look to the upper left, you can see we're in user perspective mode. We're in this view because this allows us to easily work in what we're about to do, which is to pull this geometry to the side. If we were in orthographic view like we originally were, this would be somewhat more difficult to see. So a lot of times you're going to pick the view depending on what you're doing at the time. So we have this manipulator here. I'm going to left click and drag this to the side like this. Then I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. I want to put a loop cut right here. We can do that by holding Control and then pressing R. And you can see that preview loop cut line right there. I'm going to left click once. Because I left click once, I can move this loop cut. I'm going to move this down slightly and then left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, currently we're on edge select, which is where we want to be. We're going to left click here. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Control. When I hold Control, there's something called the shortest path technique. So I'm about to click here. I didn't click here yet. I'm holding Control down currently now. When I select Control, these 2 edges here are going to be selected as well. So now I'm left clicking. I let go of Control. So now we have these 4 edges here selected. We're going to take the manipulator and we're going to push this in some like that. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, we're going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. We're going to go to the upper left, go to face select. Before we actually select, let's look to the right to our mirror modifier. We're going to put a check mark next to clipping. What this does is this keeps the 2 pieces of the geometry from separating from each other. So this is actual geometry. This is the mirror geometry. That clipping keeps this together. So we're going to press C for paint select. We're selecting these faces here. I'm going to right click to get out of paint select. I'm going to take the manipulator. I just held the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to push this out like this. I'm going to I rolled the mouse wheel to zoom back. Hold the middle mouse button. I think I did. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to press S to scale this down, so it's just a regular scale. I'm going to bring this up like this. With this area here selected, I'm going to press S to scale this up like this. Pull that out to the side some. And I basically want this to be straight, so I'm pushing this down some like that. I'm going to press S to scale on the Z axis like this. Again, looking to the side. I'm going to push this down. This is where engines and things are going to basically come out of here. Going towards this side, I'm going to left click. I'm going to press C for paint select. Select these faces here. I'm going to right click to get out of paint select. And here I'm just pulling this forward like this. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press E to extrude. I'm going to right click. When I press E to extrude, I made new geometry. It doesn't look like I did anything, but there's new geometry here. Because there's new geometry, now I can drag that new geometry out. For these major sections here, what we want is 4 faces. So with this, I'm going to press S to scale this down. Something like that. Again, I want this to be basically straight. And now I'm going to extrude again. So I'm going to press E to extrude, right click. We made new geometry. It doesn't look like we made new geometry, but it's there. And we can pull this geometry out like that. Okay, I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. We're still on face select, which is good. We're going to press C for paint select. We want to select these faces right here. I'm going to right click to get out of paint select. Zoom back just so by rolling the mouse wheel so I can see this better. I'm going to pull straight forward like that. Holding shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to take a look. This part here, I'm going to press C for here, actually. Select in here. Push this down like that. Press that's the scale. That bring it up some. I want this to be, actually I don't want it to be lower than this here. I want this to be totally flat. So what I'm going to do is press S to scale on the Z axis 0 and then left click. And what I did, when I press S to scale on the Z axis 0, I just flattened out the selected area, the area that I had selected. So I want to deselect there, so I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to press C for paint select. We're going to select right here. We don't want this side, so I'm going to press C and then hold the middle mouse button, or press the middle mouse button, I should say, to deselect. So we have just this here selected. So with that selected, what we're going to do is press E to extrude and then right click. We made new geometry. We're going to press S to scale. So now we have this face here. We're going to push this back some like that. Now we're going to press E to extrude again, right click. We made more new geometry. We're going to bring this up like this. I'm going to press S to scale that down some. We're going to press, let's bring this down some like that. We're going to press E to extrude, right click. We have new geometry. We're going to press S to scale. Scale that more. E to extrude, right click. And S to scale. We're going to left click on nothingness to deselect. We're going to press C for paint select. We're going to drag this forward some like that. Then we're going to left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to select here. I'm going to press the O key. That turns on this that you see right here. This is called the proportional editing tool. The proportional editing tool allows you to manipulate more than one vertex, edge, or face at a time. So I have just this face here selected, right? I'm going to press G. When I press G, that allows me to move. It also allows me to see that circle there. When I roll my mouse, see the circle getting bigger? This is the area of influence of that proportional editing tool. I'm going to left click. So I press G mainly just to change the size of the circle. You can see the area of influence, proportional editing. When I select this manipulator, which I'm about to do, you'll see that circle come back. And we're going to make this wider by doing that. So okay, so now I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to select here, hold shift, then select here. I'm going to actually press O to turn off the proportional editing tool, zoom back, pull this out to the side like this. Then I'm going to press S to scale on the Y axis like that. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to press C for paint select. I'm going to press S to scale on the Z axis like this. I don't want this. See how this is going up now? I don't want that, so I'm going to push this down. Reason why I did this is I wanted there to be more room for the engines, was my thought process. So I'm selecting here because see how this comes up? Looks like it comes up too much. So that's why I'm selecting here because I'm about to push this down like that. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to press C for paint select. We're going to select these faces here. We're going to right click, press E to extrude, right click. We made new geometry. We're going to press S to scale. See how this is thin right here? To deal with that, we're not pressing S to scale. We're going to push in like this. Say, now with that, what we're going to do is we're going to press E to extrude, right click. And then this new geometry that we made by extruding, we're going to push in like this. So then we're going to left click to deselect. Now I'm holding the middle mouse button to take a look. Okay, what we're going to do is roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. We're going to add some geometry to this. So I'm going to hold Control, press R to put a loop cut in. I want more loop cuts. So I'm going to roll the mouse. So I rolled it once. I'm going to roll it again. Then I'm going to left click once to lock that, to put the loop cuts in. Then I'm going to left click a second time to lock those loop cuts in. Holding the middle mouse button, rotate. Now what I'm going to do is hold Control. While holding Control, I'm going to press B. I'm then going to hold Shift for fine control. I'm going to pull my mouse down. Then I'm going to left click to lock that in. I'm then going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. Okay, we're going to add some more geometry in. Let's break this up some. We're going to hold Control, press R. We'll put in 2 loop cuts there. Left click twice to lock that in. We'll hover here, hold Control, press R. 2 loop cuts here. Left click to lock that in. Left click a second time to totally lock that in. I'm going to hold Control, press R. I'm going to put in 2 loop cuts here. I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. I'll hover here, hold Control, press R. Roll the mouse wheel to put more loop cuts in. Left click once, left click a second time to lock those loop cuts in. Okay, I'm going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Control, press R, put another loop cut there. I just left click twice there. I want to break this up, so I'm going to hold Control, press. Held Control, press R, rolled the mouse to put the other 2 loop cuts in. I'm going to left click twice to lock that in. I'm going to hover here, hold Control, roll the mouse wheel once, left click a second time to lock that in. Left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button. I want to break this up with a loop cut. So I'm going to hold Control, press R, left click once, left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. I actually want to separate where we have this loop cut. So I'm going to press W. And what that does is that lets me rip this edge here. So this edge is now separated. This just makes it easier for me to select and work with this. I want to break this up with loop cuts. I'm going to hover here, hold control, press R, roll the mouse wheel enough time to get all those loop cuts. I'm going to left click once, left click a second time to lock that in. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is hover. Well, I'm going to go to face select in the upper left. I'm going to hover here, press L to select this. I'm going to press P. This brings up our separate menu. I'm then going to choose selection to separate that out. So now this selection is its own separate object there. I'm going to go to edge select, hold Alt, select that edge there. I'm going to press V, pull. So this is separated here as well. I'm going to left click, hover here, press L, then I'm going to press P, and then choose that P brought up our separate menu. I'm going to choose selection to separate that. Then I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is this right here. I'm going to hover here, press L to select all of this geometry. I'm going to press P, which brings up our separate menu. I'm going to choose selection to separate that geometry. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to hold down the mouse button to rotate the view. Make sure we're on edge select by looking to the upper left, which we are. We want to separate this. When I say this, I mean kind of like this flat area here. So I'm going to hold Alt. I'm going to, not the top area, but like underneath here, right? So I held Alt. Because I was holding Alt, I was able to select that entire loop going around, which is excellent. I'm going to press V. So that allowed me to separate that edge that I selected from the geometry underneath of it. Okay, so since this geometry is separate, I'm going to go to the upper left, go to face select. I'm going to hover over this geometry, press L. So I selected all that. I'm going to press P to bring up our separate menu, and then going to choose selection. Okay, so we have our space battleship separated into pieces. I'm going to zoom back. I'm going to go to the upper left. I'm going to go to object mode. Here in object mode, I'm holding the mouse button to rotate the view. Rotating the view mainly to move the camera as well as the light out of the way. I'm going to left click on nothingness to deselect. Press C for paint select. Select the entire space battleship. Right click to get out of paint select. Hold shift, press D. I move my mouse just to make sure it's duplicated. I right click to get that duplication to jump right back into its original position. I'm going to press the M key to bring up the Move to Collection menu. I'm going to select New Collection. I'm going to name this Back Up. So I have a backup of the battleship here. I'm going to select this eye so that that disappears. We have different pieces of the battleship. So this is the original, not the backup. This is the front. So I'm going to just press F, so we know that that's the front. This is the top middle. So I'm going to name this TM. This is the deck area here. So I'm going to double click, name this D. This is the bottom middle. So I'm going to double click and name this BM. This is the back area as well as the engine area. So I'm going to name this, EA for engine area. Okay, let's select the front area. One of the things in Blender is in Blender, there's many different ways you can do things. I split this up mainly to, it seemed like an easier way to do what we're about to do. I've made a space battleship. I called it a capital ship in the past. I found out about how to make a new one using the discombobulator add-on. So I wanted to make this tutorial. Somebody had also asked me about making things like this. So with this area here selected, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the upper left. We're going to go to edit mode, right? This is what the discombobulator, what it does is it makes basically greebles, and greebles are kind of like small, not small, they're like detailed, multiple pieces of detailed structure, or in our case, geometry. So the discombobulator lets you do that very easily. Typically, when you see like a space battleship type of thing, you'll see a lot of detail like that. So this works out well. Now, each of these faces of this geometry will be affected by the discombobulator add-on. We don't want to have every piece affected. We want there to be some variation in this. Blender makes that very easy for us to do. So what we're going to do is go to the upper left. We're going to go to select. We're going to go to select random. So now we have these random pieces of geometry selected. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to select our different areas, and then we're going to select apply to apply the mirror modifier. I just selected areas. I just selected apply for all those areas. Okay, so what we're going to do is select this front area here. In Blender, there's multiple different ways of doing things. This is my way of doing this. What we're going to do is we're going to, with that front area selected, go to edit mode. We want to select multiple, not this whole thing, but multiple pieces here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to, with face select on, we're going to go to select on the upper left. We're going to go to select random. With this select random selector, we're going to hold shift, press A. Then we're going to select this discombobulator right here. We're going to leave the settings as default. Then we're going to select OK. So now what happened is we have all this extra detail here. To see things easier, we're going to go to the upper right. This is the viewport shading. You have our, wait a second. Okay, this is our solid view here. This is our, the name of this has changed numerous times. So now this is the material preview. So we're going to left click there. We're going to go to our material settings. We're going to go to this basic color. We're going to make this darker just to see better what we're working on. We're going to go to the top, second from the top button where we see this ambient occlusion. We're going to put a check mark here. We're going to select the arrow there. We're going to take this distance up to around 0.8. There we go. And if I zoom in, if I take this off, you can see we can see a lot more detail as we work here. When we use the discombobulator, a new mesh was made called the discombobulated mesh. Okay, so for now, we're going to take this discombobulated mesh. We're going to hide that. We're going to select this front area again, go to the upper left, go back to edit mode. So this is the area that was left over. What we're going to do is we're going to, this geometry here, we're going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then select faces to delete. We're then going to select this geometry here, hold shift, press A, select the discombobulator, and then select OK. Okay, so what we're going to do now is hide that mesh, select this mesh here, then we're going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then we're going to delete that mesh right there. We can go to our scene collection and then bring back these pieces of mesh right here. Okay, what we're going to do now is select this top section here. We're going to go to the upper left and go to edit mode for that section. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to press A to select all of these faces here. We're going to hold shift, press A. We're going to select the discombobulator. When you hover over these settings, this will give you a description of what's going to happen. This is very important. This max height as well as this minimum height. I think that things tend to work well when this is lower. So I'm going to set this to 0.1 1. I'm going to set the minimum height to 0.01. I'm going to press enter to lock that in. For this repeat protrusions, I'm going to set this to 2. And then with that set, the way I work with this, I don't tend to use this, at least right now. So I'm going to left click on OK. Okay, now you can see we have all of this detail added in. I'm going to zoom in. Yeah, all that detail in with that small amount of work. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click here. We're going to go to the upper left and then go to edit mode for here. We're going to press A to select all of this geometry. Okay, what we're going to do now is select this back part. We're going to go to the upper left, go to edit mode. We're going to go to edge select. We're going to hold shift as well as alt. We're going to select these edge loops here. Manipulator's in the way there, so I'll select there. I'm letting go of shift as well as alt. I'm now going to hold control. And then I'm going to press B. I let go of control as well as B. I'm holding shift for fine selection. I'm pulling my mouse. I'm beveling these edges. And then I'm left clicking to lock that bevel in. I'm letting go of shift. Now I'm going to select this arrow to move that out of the way. I'm going to press the X menu to bring up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. Okay, we're going to press A to select everything. Hold shift, press A. We're going to select the discombobulator. For the max height, we want to have this set to 0.1. For the minimum height, we want to have this set to 0.01. The rest of the settings are fine, so we're going to select OK. Okay, what we're going to do now is select this deck area here. I'm going to go to edit mode. So I don't want this changed with the discombobulator. However, I would like to have this broken up. So what I'm going to do is press L. I am going to, when I say broken up, I mean the different faces showing. So I'm going to go to the upper middle of the screen, go to this pivot point option. I'm going to set this to individual origins. And then with this area here selected, actually I need to go to face select. Not with this whole area selected. I actually want just the most top portions here. I don't want the side that's there. So I am pressing C. I just want this top area right here. Going to the engines. And you'll see why. So I'm going to right click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold shift, press D to duplicate. I'm then going to right click because we have this pivot point set to individual origins. What we can do is use a special type of extruding or use a special way of extruding. I'm going to hold Alt, press E. This brings up our extrusion menu. I'm then going to left click on extrude individual faces and then right click. When I duplicated these faces, this is now separate from the faces beneath it. And then when we did extrude individual origins, basically what's going to happen is we're going to be able to extrude each of these faces like it's an individual face. So we're going to press S to scale. I'm going to hold shift for fine selection. And you can kind of see like the spaces in between the panels there. I'm going to press S again, hold shift to give more space there. Okay, with that done, I'm going to press extrude again. I'm going to right click to get that geometry to stay in place. Now I'm going to move this extrusion up like that. I'll also press S to scale, hold shift for fine selection to just give some more shape. I think I'm going to press S to scale, shift even more. There we go. Okay, now we have this geometry underneath here. I'm going to press, can I? There we go, control. So, selecting everything. All right, so if I press L, here's this new geometry here, right? I'm going to press H to hide that. If I press L, oh, I thought okay, that's fine. Thought there was like another thin sheaf. I'm going to hold Alt, press H to bring that geometry back. Okay, for here, I'm going to hold shift, select these different pieces here, press E, right click. Now, the only reason why when I extrude, this extrudes like each one extrudes by itself is because of this pivot point settings being individual origins and using Alt E instead of just E. Okay, so I'm going to use very similar technique to we used before. I'm going to hold Alt, press E. We're going to select extrude individual faces. I'm going to right click, press S to scale. Now I'm going to press E to add more geometry. I right click, doesn't look like we made new geometry. What we did, we're going to take that new geometry and push that down. Actually, I don't want it down. Below that face, I'm going to press S to scale. I'm going to press E again. Right click, press S to scale. Now I'm going to press E again. Right click. Bring this up. Like that. Then yeah, I'll leave it like that. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to select here. I'm selecting here because this is supposed to be a space battleship. We need some, seems appropriate to have some weapons on here. So I'm going to hold shift, press S. This brings up, shift S, brings up our snap to menu. I'm then going to select cursor to select it. I put the cursor here because in Blender, where the 3D cursor is at, is where objects tend to come in at Blender at. So we're in edit mode for this. It was useful to be in edit mode because I was able to select this one face, right? Because I want the object to come right here. However, since I already have the 3D cursor there, now I'm going to go to the upper left, then go to object mode. So I want to bring a new object right to this 3D cursor right there. Okay, what we're going to do now is hold shift, press A. This brings up our add to menu. We're going to go to mesh circle. Here's the mesh circle right here. Mesh circle is very useful because when you look at this menu here, we're going to click on the triangle. Circle is made up of 32 vertices. We're going to change this to 8. We're then going to left click to get that menu to move out of the way. We're going to select this circle. We're going to go to the upper left. We're then going to go to edit mode. So we're in the edit mode of the circle now. We're going to go to the upper left, select, go to vertex select. Zoom in. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to left click off the circle, press A. So now we have the circle selected. Okay, we want to fill this circle. When we look to our bottom right, we can see there's 8 vertices for this. Because there's even vertices, we can hold control, press F. This brings up our face menu, and then we can select something called a grid fill, which automatically fills in that face for us, which is nice. We're going to press E to extrude, right click. We made new geometry. We're going to extrude that new geometry up. Thinking. Okay, we're going to press E to extrude, right click, and press S to scale. E to extrude again, right click, bring this down some, press S to scale. E to extrude again, S to scale, E to extrude again, bring this up. E to extrude again, S to scale, we'll pull this up some. E to extrude again. We're going to hold Shift D, or press Shift D. So we have this duplicated mesh here. So we're going to bring this out some, press E to extrude, right click, bring this up like this, S to scale on the top. And I separated this because we can change the sizes of this fairly easily now. We still have our pivot point set for individual origins. So what that does is that allows us to select these two faces here. And then from those two faces, what we can do is we can press Alt-E, select individual faces, then right-click, then press S to scale. So we scale those faces individually. We're going to press E to extrude, right-click. I'm going to right click, I didn't want that. I'm going to push these in like this. With those faces selected, we're going to right click, we're going to select subdivide. Okay, for this next part, you want to go to edit, preferences, go to add-ons, scroll down, we're looking for mesh loop tools. This right here, make sure you have a check mark next to that. Okay, the reason why I told you to do that was now because we have that add-on on, we have four faces here. We're going to right click and we're going to go to loop tools. Then we're going to select a circle. So now that's changed to a circle. So I'm just scaling down. So now with this scale down, hopefully you can see that, I'm going to press E to extrude, right click, bring that circular object out. It's slightly tilted, so I'm going to press S to scale on the y-axis 0, then left click. So I pressed S to scale on the y-axis 0, and that flattened out this geometry so that the geometry is flat facing forward. Okay, so with that done, we're going to press E to extrude, right click, we're going to press S to scale. Now, see how I'm scaling both things at the same time? That's because of the pivot point set for individual origins. So if you're having issues, make sure you have this pivot point set for, selected. The default pivot point is the median point. Earlier in this tutorial, we selected individual origins. That's why this is working correctly. So with these scaled up, I'm going to, or it's working like it, you know, as I'm doing it, it's because of that. So we're going to press E to extrude, right click. Bring this forward like this. We're going to press E to extrude, right click, press S to scale. I'll hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view some. Okay, we're going to press E to extrude, right click, and then take the manipulator, push that back some. Rotating the view, just making sure I didn't move the geometry back too far. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, we're going to go to the upper left hand corner, go to object mode. Okay, the 3D cursor is currently here. I want this in the center of the screen, so I'm going to hold Shift, press C. We zoom back, but the 3D cursor is now in the center of our scene. Okay, the reason I wanted the 3D cursor in the center of our scene is I want to hold Shift, press A. This brings up our Add To menu. I'm going to go to Empty Cube. I wanted that empty cube to be in the center of our scene. The reason why I wanted that was I'm going to hold Control for a smooth zoom. I wanted to be able to take this object. I'm going to scale this down. There it goes. I wanted to be able to scale this object down, and then I wanted to be able to put a mirror modifier on it. So I went to the, it looks like the wrench, add modifier, and now I'm going to the mirror modifier. So now we have a mirror modifier right here. However, I want this mirror modifier to be centered by the empty. So I'm going to left click there, then select, press M. I pressed EM, just hovering over here. Now I can select this empty. So now you can see this energy weapon is on the other side, and it's mirrored on that empty. Even though the empty is in the back, it's still in the center of our scene. So I'm able to take this object and mirror it right to that other side there. So I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, so I'm going to select this object here. I'm going to hold Shift, press D, right click. I'm going to go to the upper left, select our move tool. I'm going to pull this forward. Now this the mirror modifier is on this object. I duplicated the object. It still has the mirror modifier on it. I'm going to press S to make these guns bigger. Push them down like that. Holding them in the mouse button to rotate the view. Obviously, these guns are in the back, so I'm thinking maybe these will be like side guns. Holding them in the mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, with this selected, I'm going to hold Shift, press D, right click. Move this back. Pull this to the side here. Move this forward. Move this up here like this. Scale this down slightly. I'm going to press Shift. Then we'll hold Shift, press D, right click. Bring these forward. Move these over here like that. Left click to deselect. Okay, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel back, hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold Shift, press R. Shift as well as R moves the 3D cursor. I'm going to hold Shift, press A. This brings up our Add To menu. I'm going to go to Mesh, Cylinder. When we did that, this menu popped up over here. See where it says Cap Fill Type Ingon? I'm going to select nothing for there. I'm going to take this down to 10, then press Enter to lock that in. And I press R to rotate on the X-axis 90. We have this here. I'll press S to make that bigger. This is basically going to be like an engine type piece. I'm going to go to this part, go to Edit Mode. I'm going to go to Edge Select, hold Alt. This is even verts. The way I can tell that is if you look underneath my mouse, you can see there's verts. It says verts colon 10/20. Hopefully you can see that. There's even geometry, so we can hold Control, press F, and then select Grid Fill to fill that geometry there. For this, I think we're going to go to object mode. I'll show you this. We'll add a modifier. So there's the wrench, looks like a modifier. We'll select add modifier, solidify. I'm going to hold shift. Solidify makes things thicker. So I'm pulling just to make this thicker. So we're going to select, well, don't need them. Select this option basically makes it look like the modifier is applied. I'm going to select apply to actually apply that modifier. Okay, what we're going to do is go to the upper left, go to edit mode. I'm going to left click on nothingness, deselect, hold control, press R. I'm going to roll my mouse wheel so I have, let's do one more loop cut. Left click once, left click a second time. I'm going to hold control. While holding control, press B, hold shift, drag my mouse, left click, press E to extrude, right click, and then press S to scale in. S to scale that geometry, not down too much. That is a fairly quick way of getting extra geometry for this piece here. Okay, I'm going to go to the upper left, go to object mode. I'm on the modifier panel. I'm going to select add modifier, select mirror. For the mirror object, I'm going to type in EM, then select the empty. Okay, I'm going to zoom the mouse wheel to go back. I'm going to take the manipulator. I'm just placing these where I think they should be at. Be careful about that center line there. I'm going to press S to scale. It's down. You don't want to have these too close to each other. I'm going to hold shift, press D to duplicate, then right click. I'm going to pull the duplicate out because it has a mirror modifier on it. That's why you can see that on the other side as well. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this here. I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click. Bring this down. I'm going to take the mirror modifier off of this, push this to the center, move this up like this. If I wanted to, I could have this be exactly center. Because I know this is the center, like the ship is the center, if I select the ship, right? If I hold shift, press S, and then select cursor to select it, I could also just center that. Now I can select this, hold shift, press S, and then select select it to cursor offset. This is directly in the center now. So it went back. I right click to get that to jump back just so I can change the view first. Held the middle mouse button to change the view. So this is directly in the center now. So now I can push this down. Hold shift, press D, then right click. And then, we have these different engine pieces to push our space battleship forward. Holding shift. So now by turning it to the side, I can see they're too far forward. Okay, so I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, we can see right through the ship. So one of the things we can do is, remember we have that backup. Let's go to our pivot point here, change this from individual origins back to the default pivot point of Blender, which is the medium point. Okay, so we have this backup. So let's bring the backup back. We'll select the backup. The backup selected. Let's see, press G. Okay. So we have our different pieces of the backup. It's very nice on Blender 2.8. You can see just by selecting. So here is this back piece. So what we're going to do is hold Shift, press D, right? We're going to press M, and we're going to move this to collection. So we're going to scale this down. This as well. There we go. So we'll scale this down. So we'll hide this piece, and this other piece we're actually going to delete. What? Oh, I get it. Okay. So we'll hold Shift, press D, right click, press M, move that to collection, hide the rest of the backup. So now we have, we can't see through. However, we have this geometry here. The geometry here is very thin, so we can go to a add modifier, go to the solidify modifier, and then increase the thickness of that. I'll left click to deselect now. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'm going to select here. Push that in slightly. Select here. Push this in slightly. We'll press S to scale these down slightly like that. I'll left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate. Let's put some textures on this. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to shading. Here in shading is where we can basically add, long story short, colors, reflections, things like that. This thing here is the principled shader. This is amazing because it allows us to do a lot of things. It allows us to do them actually very quickly. So what we're going to do is we are going to take the metallic up for this, take the specular down, take the roughness down, just to make this shinier. I'm going to give this a bluish, grayish color right there. Okay, we want to break up some of the smoothness, so we're going to go to Add, Texture, Voronoi. We're going to bring in that color ramp. You'll use color ramps a lot when working with shaders. Remember that. They are extremely useful. Okay, we want to go to Add again, go to Vector, bring in a bump map. Okay, so we're going to go from distance to factor, from color to height, then from normal. You can't see the normal in here. I'm holding the middle mouse button to pan up. From normal to normal on here. Okay, what we want to do with this Voronoi texture, I'll zoom in so you can see this better. Take this scale way up. Way up. So it's 100 there. We're still going way up. Still going. Passing 300, going up to into the 500. So now that we have it up to like 500, see where it says strength 1 on this bump map? We're going to change this to 0.1. And now you can see, like, with that 0.1, what we have is we have not a lot of that super smooth look that we had. We don't have that anymore. Okay, and you can adjust those settings with those basic settings set up. What we're going to do is go to the Material tab, to the over to the right. We're going to select plus to make a new material. We're going to select New. So this doesn't have any of the setup of this. What we're going to do is go back to that previous material that we set up. We're going to go to the right, select this arrow looking button. We're going to select copy material. Then we're going to go to this material, go back to that arrow and select paste material. Okay, so you might sit there and say, well, why are you doing that? It's the same. Well, for instance, I want to change this, right? I don't want to change all of the material. So this is the material 1 here, right? I'm going to select here, make a new material just like we did before. This is, I'm going to confuse you. This is a similar material. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy that material, and then we're going to paste that material to here. Now, however, for this material, we're going to get rid of that material. So now this is just the new material we just made, right? So what we can do is I'm going to take down the metallic. I'm going to bring up the roughness here. And then I'm going to make this a darker color. And we can do that without affecting the other material on the other side. Or not say other side, I mean like this material still stays the same. Okay, if you wanted, you could name this material as well. I'm going to select this weapon here. I'm going to select new. I'm going to change this to material 1. I'm going to go to the right, the plus arrow to the right, select new. And then what I'm going to do is go to this top material, copy the material so I don't have to redo this, and then paste the material. So the reason why I'm doing this is I have a new material. I can do whatever I want. The color in it will only affect the gun. So since I have this material here, this new material, I'm going to take this material away. Okay, so I'm going to name this material darker material. Then what I'm going to do is select these guns here, holding shift when I select them. Then I'm going to select this gun here last. I'm letting go of shift. I'm going to hold control, press L, and then I'm going to select materials, and now they all have the same materials as the other weapon. Okay, I'm going to select the deck. I'm going to go to plus, select new, double click the name this to deck, select this, select arrow, copy, deck, arrow, paste. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to select this material, select minus to take that material away. For the deck material, I'm going to take this, well, I'm going to lower down the metallic, bring up the roughness, go to the base color and bring this to a darker color. Okay, while we're in here, we're going to hold Alt, left click and drag, take this off. You could just unplug it as well. I'm going to switch to a Musgrave texture. So I'll just move this away, out of the way. Connect this to here. And I'll take this scale way up, right to about I'm thinking around 500, just to get a slightly different texture. I'm also going to go to add color, mix RGB. It's mix RGB. There's another mix that sometimes can be confusing. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to connect this in here, connect this to the color here. I'm going to select this color here, go to the eyedropper, select a similar color, and then this factor allows us to control how much of the bottom color comes in. And what that allows us to do is to just break up that color. So I'm taking a look at it now. Might take this strength up to 0.2. Okay. Okay, so we're going to select here. I imagine this is where the main people running the ship would be at. We're going to go to Edit Mode. We're going to zoom in, left click on nothingness, go to Face Select. We're going to look for one of our smaller faces. I'm holding Control as well as the mouse button to zoom in. Okay, with our face select on, we're going to select that face right there. We're going to go to Select, select Similar, and then in Select Similar, we're going to select Perimeter. What this does is just allows us to easily select random faces, however, not too many random faces. So now we're going to go and select plus, new. Now we don't have to do a copy paste here because we're going to assign this material that we're making. So what we're going to do is select add. We're looking for shader emission. We're going to actually unconnect the principled shader and connect the emission shader to the surface texture. And then what we're going to do is take this up to yellow. Then we're going to select assign. Okay, and what that did is just make it look like there's various, I imagine, like spaces lit up because there's people, that's what I think, working in there. What we want to do now is have those lights be more effective. So we're going to the right. We're going to put a check mark next to bloom. We're also going to go to subsurface. No, that's not it. We don't want that. We are looking for screen space reflections. So if we zoom in here, we're going to turn this on. Okay, we're also going to look for our viewport. We're going to take this up to 100 just to make that better as far as those how things look there. We are going to go back to object mode, zoom back. I'm going to select here. I'm going to go to the materials, select here, and then select deck material for there. Then left click on nothingness to deselect. Okay, if you want to zoom quickly in on something, like one of these guns, you can hold Shift, press B, then draw a zoom box to zoom in. So this is very sharp. I don't want that. So we're going to go to the, looks like the wrench, which is our modifier tab. Then we're going to left click the arrow, looks like an arrow. We're going to go to bevel. And then with this on, you see how that looks now? Smoother. So watch when I select this monitor. Oh, wrong one. That's why I'm like, it doesn't look. Okay, that was selected the mirror. So see how this looks here? Now watch what happens when I select the monitor. See how it's sharp? So things look much better with the bevel modifier on, I think. Okay, I want to put a bevel modifier on the other weapon. So I'm going to left click, hold Shift. And then I'm going to make sure the weapons that have the bevel modifier on that I want, I'm going to select last. I'm going to let go of Shift. Now I'm going to hold Control, then press L. This brings up our Make Links menu. I'm going to select modifiers. And now they all have that bevel modifier on them as well. These weapons here. I'm going to left click to deselect. Okay, so what we're going to do is select here. This is very sharp, so what we can do is add a bevel modifier to there as well. That takes away that sharpness there. Okay, so we'll select here. We'll add a bevel modifier. Select here. We'll add a bevel modifier. Select there. We'll add a bevel modifier. Hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Let go of Shift. We're going to select here and then select the bevel modifier as well. Okay, so what we are going to do now is let's go to our layout. We have our ship done. Let's add some lighting to the scene to take a look at things with different lighting. Okay, this is a space battleship, so let's make this look like it's in space. How can we do that? We'll go to our world tab. Now see this strength? This is the strength of the color of the background. So if we take this down and then we go to our rendered mode, now we can see that this is, very similar to space. We're going to select back on our material options. Now we have this light here. Let's take this light up, right? Let's go to our lower right. Change this to a sun light. Let's make this easy to aim. How can we do that? We're going to hold Shift. While holding Shift, right click, put the 3D cursor there by holding Shift and then right clicking. Why we do that? We want to bring an object into Blender, and that's an empty. We're going to use the empty to aim the light. 3D objects tend to come into Blender where the cursor's at. So we're going to hold Shift, press A. We're going to bring in an empty cube to control the light. We're going to select the light, right? We're going to go to our object constraint button. And what we want to do is go to damp constraint. We're going to take this eyedropper and then select the empty. The light is aimed here, which is not at our empty. So we're going to go to the minus Z, and now the sun lamp is aimed at our empty. And wherever we move the empty at, the sun lamp should aim here. So when we select here, we can see that that is happening, which is good. Okay, so we're going to go to our render button. So this looks like this because of the sun lamp. With the sun lamp selected, we'll go to the right, select our light tab. Our strength is set for 1,000. We'll change this to 10, then press enter. That makes things look much better. Okay, so what we're going to do is roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. We're going to push the sun lamp over. When we do that, I like how the ship looks better. However, the bottom of the ship doesn't show, so we're going to hold Shift, right click to put the 3D cursor beneath the ship. Okay, we're going to hold Shift, press A. We're going to bring in a point lamp. We're going to make sure we're selected on the light tab. We're going to change the power to 200 and then press enter. Let's make sure this is actually underneath. So just so we can see something is my thinking. Okay, if you want to do more work on your ship, what you could do is go to Solid View, select here, go to Matte Cap, select the sphere, then select here, and then select Cavity. Okay, this view makes it very easy just to see the different shapes of your ship. If you want to work more in the actual geometry of the ship. Using the discombobulator add-on, you can add detail to models like this very quickly. You could very easily add additional work to this mesh or make other types of space battleships. Okay guys, that's it for the tutorial. I hope you learned a lot from this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. For those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel and you would like to see more, please subscribe, and thank you for viewing.